Right, you joined us back here in the atrium in Touchwood, and I have bumped into two authors that I'm going to have a chat with now. The first one is a guy called Michael Layton, and Mike's going to tell us a little bit about what type of genre he deals in his writings. Mike, how are you?
Good afternoon. Thanks for talking to me. My background is I'm a retired police officer, so did 42 years in 3 different police forces. So I've written or co-written a number of books, as you'd probably expect, which are police-related. Mainly factual, but a couple of historical crime fiction books as well. So the book I'm here today with Bruin Publishers for, though, is a book slightly different, which is Top Secret Worcestershire. And very briefly, it's a book about the history of radar development during the Second World War. It's not a dry book. There's a little bit of technical detail in there, but there's also a lot of history, factual history, and quite a few recollections from people who were either involved in the subject or were family members. So they've got memories of family who were involved in the subject. The book starts with a story about the fact that during the Second World War, some British commandos went across to occupied France and brought back a piece of German radar. But they suddenly realised that all the British radar development was in the southwest. So they decided, within a period of 3 months, on the basis that if the British could go to France and steal something, the Germans could do the same. So they moved everything to Malvern. So the scientists went to Malvern, and part of the National Trust at Croom was developed as RAF Defford and nearby RAF Pershore. So the scientists used to develop the technical side of the work, and then they would test it on the aircraft, both in test purposes and live operations during the Second World War. And there are those that attribute the development of the radar to shortening the Second World War. So quite an important piece of technology. So something technical, but something human as well. From my recollections, are you talking about airborne radar or land-based radar? Because airborne. I thought the land-based radar was those pylons around the Kent coast sort of thing. I'm not an expert on those, but certainly some of the aspects of the Second World War developments of radar have generationally developed in modern days. So blind landings, as they were called then, actually still take place. The technology far more advanced, obviously, but the technology is still there today in terms of commercial aircraft, modern aircraft being able to land, as it were, blind onto runways. So it's got a lot of photographs in. Probably most have never been seen by the public before, but we were able to track down family members who've preserved these mainly black and white photographs over the generations. So a real privilege for us to put them into a book form, really.
Excellent. And then you've collaborated on this particular book, haven't you?
Steve Burrows is the co-author. We're both retired West Midlands police officers. As I say, mainly we've done police books, but we worked on it together. There's a museum at Croom which is dedicated to the RAF. So quite, for listeners, quite an interesting place to go and visit. National Trust at Croom. And you can actually see on site there a little museum and it really takes this story visually one step further.
It's a very interesting topic, especially for me, because I like radio.
Right, okay, so, well, there's the book, so you'll have to speak to Alistair and see what you can do. But
thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and wish you all the best here on your author day.
Lovely, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks, Mike. Right, let's have a wander round and see who else we can speak to. This looks like another author here. A guy called Donald. Lovely to see you. I'm Jeff from Solihull Radio. Yep. What sort of genre do you live in, Don?
Well, I've driven up from Lincolnshire. I've just arrived here. It's beastly cold and wet. So rather than pop into Witherspoons, I think I'd better settle for a cup of coffee. All right. But as to the genre, the latest novel I did was titled 9/12, Another Day, which was someone assuming a new identity following 9/11, because although they've given the body count, not all the bodies were reclaimed, and they still think there are people missing. And I had the ideas, I go to New York on a regular basis, that someone may have decided to completely change their life. Either they were unhappy in their marriage, or they're up to their eyeballs in debt. And this is what happened. We've got our hero in this novel, Joe Solomon, who's a Vietnam vet and gives it all up, goes into Wall Street, and then, unfortunately, gets ensnared into insider trading on behalf of organised crime. Now, he's off the Americans' Inland Revenue radar, but he has a lunch in their restaurant with their people, and suddenly he's on the radar, and he's given the impossible catch-22 situation. Either he is the American government's witness, and they say to him, if you don't take the stand, you're going to a prison which makes Guantanamo Bay look like Butlins, and organised crime say, even if you think of going there, you, your family, and that will never see the light of day. And so he's for the first time, he's late going to work on the morning of 9/11, and he decides to have a coffee in Zuccotti Park because he thinks, oh well, I'm late. And he sees the plane go and he thinks, blimey, I'll be dead, because it's into his office. And he makes a snap decision. That's it, change. So no contact, no nothing. And the novel's about his 6 years away with this new identity. And then lo and behold, he's off the coast of Texas, and he gets hold of the New York Times on page 3. 9/11 widow needs money for funding son's operation. He didn't know she was pregnant. She was going to tell him, and now he can't bear. He wants a reunion, so he brokers that through his old commanding officer. But of course, neither the government nor organised crime have gone away. That's
wow.
Another day.
I tell you what,
I've adapted it for a screenplay as well. So if a producer said that would make a good film, there we are, my boy.
There you go. The job is done.
Yes.
I tell you what, it sounds a great premise.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
that's a really good. I'm very interested in that.
9/12 another day. Okay?
9/12 another day. Amazon.
Maybe Bruin will up the royalties. About time they did.
Oh, yeah. There he is.
The other one is A Village Tale, which is set during the Great War, and it's the way the war changed life irrevocably in the rural areas, and it's set around where I'm living in Lincolnshire.
Which part of Lincolnshire?
Near to a place called Mareham le Fen. Okay. Apparently the Wash used to come up near there, and that's where King John lost the crown jewels.
That's right, yeah, he did.
People say it's Wisbech, but we think it's around Mareham, okay? But it's the second largest county and the second least populated, the only county without a motorway. I'll tell you, Lincolnshire Tourist Board are going to love me, aren't they? And we've just got a university, but it is beautiful. It's not as flat as a pancake, the south of the county is, but not the north. And this is about a group of fen pals who join up, king and country, and life changes them, and it changes the shape of a particular village they came from. And it all came about when I used to drive past the War Memorial, thinking to myself, one day I must get out and look at the names. And I kept passing it for a year after it. Then I got a puncture, so I had to stop. And that's when, and I suddenly saw the names with two sets of names similar on either side, the obelisk. And I thought, this must have reduced the male population, because it was a small hamlet, and that's when I got the idea. Oh.
That's another brilliant idea. You've sold 2 books to me, Don.
Yeah. Well, I think Alistair may have brought down another 2, because they've published 4, and the one in the offing now is called Someone, and it's about a fight that took place in New York in the 1950s. A black American with a great career behind him, and a young Italian American, and the New York Athletic Commission will not allow people to have a purse that's over 80-20, so it has to be 60-40, 70-30. And what the 2 managers say is, behind the scenes, it's going to be winner take all, and the black American, he needs money to pay for his nephew's operation, and the Italian American, he needs the money to hire a fancy lawyer to get his brother off death row. And so during the course of 15 tumultuous rounds, both men's lives are examined and looked at. So that's the one which I'm hoping, It's titled Someone. I've also adapted it for a screenplay, and Bruin Books have had it a few months now. So hopefully,
they're out there. Alistair's pushing it.
Bruin will do the business.
Excellent stuff.
So do ask him.
I will do. All right. Well, listen, Don, I appreciate your time. Go and have a coffee and relax and get into it.
I'm going to wait him to give me my pocket money.
Oh,
50p.
He's after 50 pence, Alistair, to get a coffee.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my pocket money.
Let's have a chat now with and Alistair's wandered away quickly. Look at that. The next author that I'm going to speak to now needs no introduction. If you've read one of the books from the Black Country, or you've followed him on all of his media channels, or you've listened to his programmes in the past, it's the one, it's the only, it's Mr. Carl Chin. Good afternoon, sir.
Well, thank you for the introduction, but I don't get called that at home.
Oh. Boom. How are you? How have you been?
I'm all right, thank you very much. Yeah, nice to be here with Brewing Books. They've been big supporters, not only of my books, but local history books across the board. And that's very important because we need to understand where we've come from and why we're all here, so then we can reach out to the world.
Excellent stuff. So you're part of the Brewing Books. Your books are primarily local history focus. You're looking at growing up in this area, where we've come from, what we're doing, and
a bit more than that. My books, yes, include lots of people's memories of people who've written to me, stories about the past. My main focus has been the history of the social history of the urban working class. So my first books were really about poorer women's lives, poverty amidst prosperity in the late Victorian period, a major social history of illegal betting, because I was a bookie, my dad was an illegal bookie, my granddad was a legal bookie. Then I've written a lot of books like Cadbury's, books on I brought together books on my articles from the Mail of the Brom and Brummies books. I've done a huge amount of work looking at the street names of Birmingham. There's a series on the street names. So it's very wide ranging. I've done books on the Black Country, and then more recently I've written the book on the real Peaky Blinders.
That's right, and that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit. My wife introduced me into that series a little bit later on into the thing. What do you think about the series in relation to where you come from in your research?
Okay, the series, first of all, let me say, has been fantastic for Birmingham. It's really drawn attention to the city in a way that we've never had before. We've never had the big gritty dramas or the series like When the Boat Comes In for the North East or Boys from the Blackstuff from Liverpool. So to have this beautifully shot, captivating, pulsating series drawing attention to Birmingham, Stephen Knight and all the team involved deserve a lot of praise. However, it's also very important to bear in mind there's a reality behind the dramatised events, places and people in the series. There were real Peaky Blinders, not one gang, numerous gangs. And they weren't around after the First World War. They were before the Second World War. And these gangsters were not glamorous, they were not handsome, they were not charismatic, they were not sexy and moody. They were vicious, vile and violent.
And, of course, over in Steelhouse, that's where they were,
Steelhouse Lane, the lockup. I was there last night giving a talk. And Steelhouse Lane lockup was opened in 1891. If people haven't been there, I urge you to go there. Lots of the real Peaky Blinders would have been locked up in the Steelhouse Lane lockup before they were brought up before either the magistrates or whatever court they were being fetched up before. It replaced older buildings in Birmingham, and so at the time when it came out in 1891 it was a modern building in a new street. That part of Steelhouse Lane was a new area. It was an old street named after Kettle's steel houses, but Corporation Street, the area around it, was a very new street. It had only just emerged.
Very cool. Let's take it to the next level. All right, so where are you going with your next sort of areas of research? What are you thinking about? Where are you putting your efforts in?
I've just finished a major second book now on the Peaky Blinders, which is looking at the fact and the fiction, but really focusing on the fact behind the fiction, where I delve really deeply into the origins of the street gangs, getting right back to the 1850s, looking in a lot more detail at the slogging gangs of the 1870s and 80s, the clothing of the Peaky Blinders, the hats that they wore, the violence that they did, and the fact that we shouldn't really be admiring these men. Looking very much at Charles Horton Rafter, the Northern Irish Protestant chief constable, who was responsible in many respects for putting down the Peaky Blinder gangs, and a lot more about the Racecourse War of 1921, which was fought by men who had been Peaky Blinders, who moved into what was known as the Birmingham Gang of racecourse ruffians, pickpockets and protection racketeers, who then went to war in 1921 with their allies from London, the Elephant Boys from South London, the Camden Town Mob from North London, against an alliance led by the real Derby Sabini, the real Alfie Solomon. I interviewed the real Alfie Solomon's younger brother in the late 1980s.
Was the undercurrent, were these people in this particular social demographic, were they the people running it, and were the police playing catch-up, or was it them and us sort of feeling, and it just sort of happened in symbiosis?
No, what happened was that the certain Peaky Blinders, certain ruffians from London, street gangs, neighbourhood gangs, they moved to the racecourses. There were rich pickings there. There were pickpockets. There were violent men. There were petty thieves. There were lazy men. There were wastrels, but there were very tough men. So they're making a lot of money. People are carrying money at racecourses. Then they start to extort protection money from the racecourse bookmakers, and they're making a lot of money.
But were the police onto it?
The police slowly got onto it. Don't forget, with regard to the Peaky Blinders, first of all, in Birmingham, the police were massively under-resourced. Seems to be a familiar theme at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're right.
When Rafter was appointed in 1899, the Inspector of Police came along, the National Inspector said Birmingham needs 500 more policemen. Now, that was important. On the racecourses, don't forget this is private land, so there are police officers around, but they haven't got the power or the numbers to stop the gangs.
And they have to be called.
They have to, yeah. Well, some of them are there as undercover, as plainclothes men, but, you know, you get these pickpocketing gangs are operating in gangs of 6, 7 and 8, very violent men. You're a copper on your own, are you going to challenge them?
No, you'd wait for your backup.
Of course you do. So the backup's not going to come. So some of them came to an accommodation, shall we say, with the gangs. There was a vicious gang war fought in 1921. A truce was called. The Birmingham gang kept the control of the rackets in the Midlands of the North. Sabini and a powerful man in the background, who you'll have to find out about when you read my new book.
There you go, everybody.
The south of England. And then the war broke out again in London because the Elephant Boys, the Camden Town Mob, and the real leader of the Birmingham gang were living in London. They weren't happy. And eventually in 1927, the Home Secretary was so embarrassed by the shootings in London that he sent in a new squad of straight coppers called the Flying Squad. And with their support and social changes, slowly the racecourse gangs disappeared.
Okay, you're a very knowledgeable man about your subject.
Thank you very much.
Excellent stuff. Listen, if you ever want to do some historical podcasts on Solihull Radio, the studio is 100 yards away.
Well said. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate your time. Take it easy. Thanks. So that was Carl Chin, and if you want to read some of his books, why don't you get across to bruinbooks.com, and I hope you've enjoyed our little presentation here from Touchwood today, and you enjoy what's going on World Book Day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Solihull Radio.